All right, here we are in Illustrator again. Today's lesson we're going to be talking about the Pattern Maker tool. It's actually quite simple. We're going to make 3 very quick patterns, 2 of which we're going to use the Pattern Maker, 1 you're going to do on your own. Pattern Maker is simply basically what you did with the hand-drawn motif one, but instead of cutting things apart, redrawing, repiecing back together, and taping down, the computer is going to do all of the work for you. So our first step is to create a new document. Let's go to File, New. Make sure it's set on letter and click OK. I want you to be taking notes during this. Please make sure that you write notes so you remember what it is that you are doing, because I guarantee you're probably not going to remember. All right, so we've got our new document here. The first step in creating a pattern is to simply create a complex object. And it doesn't have to be super complex. It can be actually quite simple. But just remember, a simple object is going to make you have a simple pattern. So I'm going to make a somewhat complex pattern here. Not too bad. And you can use any tools that you've learned thus far. You can even use the gradient options if you want to. If you feel confident in trying the gradient options. Kind of making a really, really ugly pattern here. We're going to talk a lot about color theory and how to pick colors that go well together. So we're going to talk about color schemes, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I kind of have a primary color scheme here, so we're going to keep it. It's kind of obnoxious, but that's okay. Almost done. All right, so I have this somewhat complex object. I'm just going to make another copy of it just so I have another one over here to the side. And I do want to show you that how big you make this object is how big it's going to be on this whole page. So if I make it this big, it's going to repeat this size. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. All right. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to select the object. Once you've selected your complex object, you're going to go up to Object, Pattern, Make. It's as simple as that. Okay, this dialog box is going to pop up. It's going to tell you, hey, I'm going to add this to your swatches panel as a new fill pattern. Click OK to that. So I'm going to pull the pattern or the swatches panel forward so you can see it. So you can kind of see in here, it's right here. It's called New Pattern. I want to call it something different, so I'm just going to call it Stars. Oops. And here's where I get to fine tune it. Now this is pretty basic. Notice it's repeating it for you. You can change the type of tile pattern that it makes, whether it's a grid or brick by column. So you can change that. You can even do a hexagon pattern. If you do the brick, it does allow you on the brick offset to decide, well, how far offset is that going to be? And you just kind of have to play around with it to see what you like. You can also deal with your width and spacing. So that's the negative space that's around your object. So you can kind of see there's some space around here. If I highlight this for the width, so I'm talking about this is the space between. If I use my arrow keys on my keyboard, notice it's gonna, if I hit down, it's gonna decrease the amount of space. I can even like overlap them. Okay, so I'm just increasing and decreasing. Height is obviously the rows. Okay. If I have some overlap, I can even then look to this overlap option there and I can control, well, which object overlaps what? How does that work? So you can play around with that a little bit. Please leave your copy set at 5 by 5. You can click where it says Show Tile Edge just so you can kind of like, well, that's what it looks like, just so you get rid of it. And then when you're happy, if you're like, yeah, this is cool, I like this, you're going to go up here and you're going to go to Done. You're going to be like, whoa, what happened to my pattern? Where did it go? Just relax, it's there. But we have to actually apply a swatch of it. So delete your object on the page. Grab the rectangle tool, click and drag, and then you're going to come over to your swatches panel and you're going to locate the pattern that you created. I called mine Stars. There it is. There's my pattern. Okay? I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I want you to call this Pattern Maker 1. Wherever you save it in your print shop. You're going to get credit for 3 different files here. All right, so that's the first one. Go ahead and do that now. And then come back, pause the video and come back. All right, so now that you've made one pattern, I just want to briefly show you what happens when I'm talking about that size. So if I grab my object that's over here, remember I said depending on how big you make it, that's how big it's going to be in the pattern. So if I make my object really big and I go to the object pattern make, notice it makes the stars much bigger. So I just wanted to briefly show that to you. I'm going to click cancel. Oops, click cancel here. We're going to create a new object, but this time I want to do it using something called the swatches panel, or not swatches panel, symbols panel, sorry. So if your symbols panel isn't open, go up to window, symbols. All right, so in this panel you have libraries. Symbols are simply like little pieces of clip art. Now I don't want you to use pictures from these, but you can use shapes and different graphic elements from it. So in other words, I don't want to use, for instance, if we go to the nature one, don't use the nature one because it's just filled with pictures of like bugs and things, which could create a cool pattern, but we're just doing geometric here. If you have time and on your own you want to do one with some of these picture ones, feel free, go for it, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to load something called the dot vector one. So we're going to click on that menu button, go to dot pattern vector pack. It's going to load these. These are all just graphic, they're not pictures of anything. Click on one of these, doesn't matter which one, click and drag. And then you're going to resize this. Okay, so any one of them, click and drag. Right. Now, right now they're just black. We can change this. We have to break the link though, because this is basically a complex object that's grouped and linked for the swatches panel. To break the link, you right click on it, go to break link to symbol. So it's no longer going to be considered a symbol. And I can edit this. So if I want to, I can now change the color. I can even delete pieces. If I decide I don't want some of this, I can delete those. Okay. If I want to grab another one, I can grab another one on there. I'm going to break that link again. I'm going to change the color. Make it a little bit smaller. Arrange at the back. All right, so I want you to use a couple symbols. It doesn't necessarily have to be just these two, whatever. You can pick from a different panel. But I want you to use a couple of symbols, change their colors, break the link, have a little bit of fun with that, and then we're going to turn these into a pattern. All right, so select those. Remember, you click and drag over object, pattern, make. It should bring up that options bar again. You're going to go through. Now this is going to be more complex because the symbols they're a little bit more complex than the simple star shape I made. You're going to go through, fine tune it the way you want it to, change your spacing, up and down. Because it's complex, it's going to take a little bit more time. Your computer might freeze on you, which mine is starting to do. When you're happy with that, you're going to go ahead and click that done. It's a lot of work for the computer right now. Click that done. It will add it to your swatches panel. We still have to apply it though, remember, so you're going to delete that. Grab your rectangle tool, click and drag, and then apply your pattern. All right, go ahead and go to File, Save As. I want you to call this Pattern Maker 2. And you're going to simply hit Save. All right, last pattern we're going to make here as practice is we're going to make a non-tiled pattern. The last two patterns we created, we used Pattern Maker, which does this tiling effect. You can either do the brick or the grid. We're going to do an organic geometric pattern, which means we're going to create it from scratch. So we're going to go to File, New, leave your presets as is. You can still use the shape tools, you can still use the symbols panel, you can use anything you want, but you're just not going to use Pattern Maker. So here's the example that I created. I'm okay if you want to use text. You can see I've got some text in here. I'm doing something special. I'm using the rocket. I don't want you guys to use things like rockets and things like that. But notice how this is not tile. There's not any one thing that's being repeated over and over again, but there's like elements being repeated over and over again. So there's some continuity. So it is a pattern. It's just not a tiled repeating pattern. So the way that you can do this is all freehand. So you're just going to grab your tool, click and drag, create your colors however you want. Yours is probably going to take more time. It doesn't have to be the same shape over and over again. But there should be like elements. So it shouldn't be every single color in the rainbow. It shouldn't be a million different kinds of shapes. There should be some kind of consistency or some kind of repetition. Remember, that's one of our rules of design. But it's not tile. But you're going to do it simply by hand. When you have some time, play around with this. Go to File, Save As. We're going to call this one Pattern Maker. Even though we didn't use Pattern Maker, we're still going to call it Pattern Maker 3. And click OK to that. All right. Please make sure that your notes are up to date before you close out of everything. When I'm done here, I will give you a presentation on how we're going to use this to create our final project. Good job, everybody.